Hi, this is Matt Donegan from Challenger Stories. I'm here with Paddy from Malt Films. Malt Films is a B2B video content and podcast agency. Paddy, tell me more about the business. How did you start with Malt Films? What's your background?
Our backgrounds, we actually started over, she's 16 years ago this year, and I was ex-agency back in Ireland. I just come into London, and there was two other people, Louise and Rob, and they'd been working with each other in the content world. It was a time I was very much so new in the world of online, and content was kind of in there. But what Rob and Louise had been working on quite a lot was the B2B element. How can her, she video should be brought into that space. I had been working in a creative agency, working on kind of big ads over in Ireland, but we were doing increasingly quite a lot of the BTS behind some of the big ads. And I found that really interesting. I was doing a lot more in the world of planning and strategy. And then to be able to talk to a client to understand, where they were going on their journey was something I'm very interested. So I left Ireland during the time of the crash, to London with that in mind, like, oh, I really like the B2B space. Ended up with Rob and Louise, who had already started Malts, and then we had combined all our talents together. And then over those 16 years, we'd honed our product very much so into the B2B space, which is kind of helping brands kind of create their the mission videos, vision videos, sizzle reels, you know what I mean, to kind of show off what they there and they do. And then it's kind of looking at then as time kind of went on and internet speeds increased and kind of the need to be able to communicate without kind of being in room presence. There was a stakeholder kind of audience of how to talk to them, and we were very much so be able to take the world of entertainment and the world of business and be able to bring that together, and it worked really strongly, and as time went on we were able to pivot, and there was quite a lot of animation being brought into it, as well as talking heads, a bit of dramatization, and then podcasts, all in the world of video, sometimes as standalone on their own. There was also print, actually digital out of home. Sometimes there's print. So, we have been and touched quite a lot in the B2B and the B2C worlds, because sometimes they just spill over and they kind of, they interlink. But that's kind of what we've been doing, and being able to get to our offering, which is the minute, is very much so in the video animation and podcast space. And it's looking at the B2B market of how to help elevate businesses, communications, sometimes working with their own internal teams, sometimes independent, of how we're able to kind of really hone that message, let them talk to their stakeholders, be they the public, their own stakeholders, or their own customers, future or existing. So it's been really fun. Love it. Every day is different.
I'm sure it is. It is in the world of content. Actually, having said that, there's been an enormous amount of change in the whole industry in the last few years. We've seen lots of creative teams go in-house. We've seen the march of AI, and there's some very interesting and kind of, to some people, quite frightening developments in that area when it comes to creativity, writing scripts, all that kind of area, or even down to actors. But there's been a massive move that we've seen with regards to agencies bringing a lot of that content production in-house. So, Alf, what's your response been? Because you're content producers. Is this a threat? How do you work with those agencies?
Every threat is also an opportunity. So that's the way I look at it, without being too, always look at the silver lining. But what I would say is there's definitely a place for both. Because volume, some places have such increased volume that financially it doesn't make sense to just always go to an agency. But what we do find is in-house agencies' creativity isn't always fresh and on tap. And I'm not saying anything bad about that in any way. The context behind why I'm saying that is they're stuck with office politics. They're stuck with what they're allowed to do or what they're not allowed to do. So stay in your lane. They're sometimes not given the permission to be that creative force. They just need the job done. Or they're told by people, it's just this. While if there's an agency brought involved, they should be working across a variety of products or, clients. So they're understanding different shifts and tones in the market as well as trends and be able to bring fresh perspectives into, communication problems. But not only that, they also have the permission to think completely differently and be bold and push and challenge. So that's what I'm saying. I do think there's a time and a place for both, but there are challenges there for each one.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So when you look at that kind of landscape, what you're saying is that where in-house is better at kind of the production line, and working with an agency like Malt Films is about ingesting new or injecting new creative into the whole process.
100%.
So there's a
100%.
very interesting story and reflection I had from a very dear friend of mine who worked at Disney for a long time. He's very high up in the Disney hierarchy, and he said something very interesting, which is you never institutionalize your creative. Got to refresh, got to keep that coming through. And when Disney kind of went off the boil, it looked at one company that was doing great things in animation and had to acquire it.
Pixar, wasn't it? Yeah.
And they bought the company, but they didn't override the creativity within that company. They just said this is complementary. And of course, we're talking about Pixar.
Yeah.
So keeping that content fresh, keeping the creative fresh, absolutely vital. I totally agree with you. So
absolutely, yeah.
What challenges do you have around it? You've got to be a fairly detail-driven person to work in content. Does that fit with your personality?
Depends on who you're talking to. I would say, yes, you need to have a team around you that complements, has different strengths. We're very lucky here in Malt that everyone brings something unique to the table. And, everyone's key asset gels really, really well. Would I say I'm a detail? I think I'm more curious. I'm probably more the world of strategy. Why are we doing this? What is in there? Why is it there? I would be detailed as to understand, what's the benefit for the client as well as what is the benefit, do you know what I mean, for the viewer. I'm kind of afraid to say no if I'm not the detailed person because in case it makes me look bad. I think I have to be honest and say I would probably be a jack of all trades and a master of none. Do you know what I mean? In some ways. And I think that's what makes me a good producer, a good creative producer in that way, because I can't do it all myself. I need to bring in other people. And I think with the detail focus, I rely really heavily on my editors who are fabulous. I have to say, like, an editor's mind is the most detailed mind you'll probably ever meet, as well as a writer. Okay. And they have, and motion graphics. I can't leave out poor on Mike, he'll shoot me, but like, you should see what they work in the programs, but also then how they can come out of the detail and look at it from a helicopter. I know it's a buzz term, but it's kind of a great way of looking at it, and they can see the bigger picture and seeing like, right, this affects that and it's going to have a huge issue. Or it's going to unlock the whole thing. So yeah, I would say I am not fully detailed, but I have team players that are fabulously detailed.
So we've spoken before. We've engaged. We've had conversations. One of the things that's come up in those conversations is neurodivergency. So tell me about your experience of this.
I'm dyslexic. I was diagnosed in my late teens. I've had amazing support. My parents have been astronomical. It was the first time it had probably been coined in my family. No one had heard the word. It was kind of probably in the world that I was in was kind of seeing, oh, that's going to keep you down. But my parents never let me do that, or were so great in finding support and support systems to kind of help me never hide it. I did hide it in my first job. When I was going into an ad agency, I had no contacts in there, no family, no nothing. My mum and dad are nurse and actually doctor, and their family are Sorry, he's not a doctor. He's a police officer. If you shoot me for saying that, I'm sorry for the misspeak
Don't
there.
get those mixed up.
Everyone thinks he's a bank manager, so he actually enjoys that one. But no one had ever been in that world of content, and I remember going into an ad agency at the time, and I hit it, and it was probably one of the most stressful things I had done because being dyslexic, copy isn't your best thing, but you're very good at spotting patterns. Some people would say organization isn't your highest thing, but I was and still am very organized. Being able to look at budgets, being able to spot patterns and get people all in. Being neurodivergent and not telling people around you so that you're explaining it but not using it as an excuse was probably the biggest challenge. And then when I got more comfortable with it, it became a massive asset because you were able to sit in a room and you were able to see the problem and you were able to see the patterns and you were able to creatively and in a very fast way come up with solutions. So clients loved you. Creatives were kind of sometimes go, get out of the room, stop talking, because you had spotted the problem before they had, and you were helping them. Because I was a suit at the time, it became an absolutely massive strength. And we mentioned before with detail, it forced me to be more detailed, and came with some interesting stories. But neurodivergency for me has always been a massive asset in my career.
Yeah.
Because of that. It's helped me solve problems. It's allowed me to look at it in such a different way.
Yeah.
And it's been a lovely way to embrace my difference, sitting in a room and go, I'm not normal. I can look at this in a different way.
Yeah.
And so because of my dyslexia, I can turn around to clients and go, well, I see it differently. And
Yeah.
this is why. And this is what it is. And 9 times out of 10, when you do that, you have a client who looks at you with wide eyes and go, I'd never thought of that.
Hey, I've got to challenge you on something there.
Yeah.
You said you used the word normal.
Yeah.
So 70%, approximately 70% of business owners are neurodivergent. So actually, as a business owner, you're very normal.
Great. I love it.
It's kind of par for the course.
Yeah. But at the time when I was when I was younger, I was in my 20s and I was in an organization, you know what I mean, and it was such a different time. It was not talked of, especially in Ireland. It was a black mark against you, not in a nasty way. It was just because, oh, you're different. And they didn't know what that different was, what the benefits were. It's, yeah, it was such an interesting time to grow up in and then own it. And as I became, more confident in my career, more confident in who I am, and as I moved into those, upper management roles, I was able to talk about it and champion it. And as you say, I was no longer different.
Yeah.
Because you meet peers and you see the fantastic work that people go through, and the support systems that they put in place.
Yeah. And well, let's look and say that Richard Branson, very famous entrepreneur, businessman, multiple businesses.
Very fond of him. Yeah, I think he's an amazing man. I follow him closely. Yeah, brilliant.
Can't read a balance sheet.
Yeah.
Cannot read figures properly.
Yeah.
And yet he's an incredibly successful entrepreneur. And
I love his little tactics of where when he goes into a room, he's very much so the charismatic. He's learned his skill that he's able to identify a product and he likes it. He's able to bring people around to his way of thinking. And then when it gets into the detail, he shakes their hand nicely and he introduces them to his team and he leaves the room and his team negotiates all the detail. And I was like, what a strategy. What a brilliant way of doing it. Again, he knows his strengths and he knows his weaknesses.
That's right. You place your strengths, and his strength is vision, and his team strength is detail and precision. So that's the big difference. But there's some of the challenges in kind of life and life experience. What about the challenges of running your business? What have you found to be the biggest challenge in the last couple of years? I mean, we can talk about the economy. We can look at that. We can talk about the sort of change in technology. Let's not mention the B word. That always upsets people. You mentioned the crash in the beginning, and of course you were talking about the great financial crash. Put those things aside. Put those kind of macro events aside. And let's just talk about what the challenge is in running the business for you outside of those macro issues. What's been your big thing?
I think it's positivity. It's been while not being blind and oblivious to what's going on. It's keeping the line of hope, but also being strategic in how you can pivot to be able to keep that hope alive. And I think that has been challenging and rewarding. We've all, it's 5 years here today, and we're not to actually date your podcast or anything else like that, but it's 5 years since we went into lockdown. And everyone remembers that first week, don't they? Of whereby, Jesus, our world is gone. Do we have a job? Are our markets safe? And that was similar to ourselves. There was that horrible question, are we going to close the doors? Or what are we going to do? Because there was no furlough at the time, do you remember?
Yeah.
And I remember just turning around and saying, no, keep the doors open. We can get around this, because we're living in a time of where you're still going to need communications, and our clients are still there.
Yeah.
And we pick up the phone. We had a gentle chat saying, guys, how are you getting on? If there's anything you need, let us know. We're still open. We're still able to help you should you need it. And that's kind of been my philosophy since that day, is just be hopeful, but pivot, and don't be afraid to pivot, because the team where we're in and the team that we have, we're not a huge company. I'm not going to hide that, but we're a team of excellent professionals who are up for the challenge and always have. You mentioned there, please don't mention the B word. That was a challenge. Got over it. The credit crunch was a challenge, and that's when we were created.
Yeah.
And we thrived. I wouldn't say we thrived during COVID, especially with the first lockdown, but the second one we did, because we knew what to do. We knew how to do it.
Yeah.
And even last year, when there was a crunch in the market, we were still able to pivot and still able to grow and find ways of helping our clients who had very restricted budgets, but a way of offering them new ways to tell stories, new ways to keep their content and their communication with their stakeholders fresh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good learnings there. Just reflecting back on that, pivoting, remain hopeful. Although, got to say, hope's not a strategy. But you got to be positive, run a business, right? Because you could wake up every morning and say, "Do I have to take another kick in?" Because sometimes it feels like that. As a business owner, often you're the last person to get paid.
Yeah.
You're the last person to get a raise. Yeah. You're the last person to get a pat on the back.
Yeah.
But you're the first person that everybody's going to look to solve a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're the first person that problem's, and often the only person inside the business that's going to keep them awake at night with that problem. So it can be a really lonely place. Has there been any person or anything that has kind of kept the lights on in your spirit, with your hope in your business journey? That could be a business leader, it could be a friend, it could be someone, an adjacent business. What's your support system been like?
Because you really hit me with that question. I'm not going to lie. You've hit on the heartstrings.
Sorry about that one.
No, don't be sorry about that one. No, it's a good one. I'm really blessed of having amazing support systems around me. I think the biggest one is my parents. And again, you just literally hit me. I wasn't expecting the question. You're just going to hit me in a good one. And they were fabulous because they've always been able to just listen and offer solid advice, rather than a knee-jerk reaction like, well, you should get paid, or well, you should be this, or you should just pack it all in and get, a 9-to-5 job. They didn't, considering their backgrounds, a nurse, a police officer, very secure jobs. They've been absolutely my pillar all the way through.
Yeah.
And after that, it's my team. They've all had their own, stories during lockdown. Got to really hit me. Sorry. Yeah, my team have been absolutely amazing because they've equally all taken a risk with me. They were all given the option to, do you want to come with us? If you want to go somewhere that's a bit more secure, we understand, we get it. and they all chose to stay. And not just stay and kind of one toe in and one toe out. Like they completely leaned in, like, and leaned in hard. Heavy nights, heavy shoots, long hours,
Oh,
sometimes in reduced wages. And subsequently, we have repaid those wages. So we made those tough decisions with them
oh.
and rewarded them. But yeah, I've been so lucky to have an amazing support system, both of my family and my team. And quite recently, yeah, I met a partner during lockdown, and last year I think he was, God love him, like he was just yeah, he was a pillar of strength to me. Like I mentioned before we started recording, I went to LA last year for 24 hours. And at the time I didn't get paid because I wasn't being paid for that month because it was so tight. So I made, I think it was like a 48-hour trip, not being paid, to film something, to bring back the rushes, to give it to the team so that I could keep them going and keep them paid. And it was my 40th birthday, so I actually missed out on a few bits. And I remember my brother came over here from Ireland, and my poor partner had to mind him and his wife, and my poor partner, like, was just like, I was like, I'm so sorry. And he goes, don't worry, just keep going. Just, we know why.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the tragedy is a lot of the time with business owners that the business owns them, and when you're missing out on some of your life events, like your 40th or children's birthdays, that's not an uncommon one.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can never get that time back. It's a bit of a corny expression, but someone told me this expression once, and it's always stuck with me, and that is children in particular, but often we all do, spell love Time. It's the time that we have with people. And that is a very powerful lesson to learn as a business owner. It's not all about the business shouldn't own you, you should own the business. You should be in control. So if there was one thing about the business that you change, what would that be?
God, sales.
Sales.
Yeah, it's finding somebody who is as passionate about malt as the team that we have and get them in to help us sell it more.
Right.
Yeah. Which I think is every business owner that I talk to has that same problem.
So the interesting thing about what I witness in the marketing industry, content kind of being part of that, is that some of the worst companies to market themselves are companies that work in marketing. And I actually did a presentation about this just last week, and it's a truth, right? So you work in the marketing industry, often they're the worst companies to generate revenue. Are you guys looking for like a silver bullet? Or
No, there's no such thing. No such thing. Yeah, yeah. You want to be very naive for that. I think it's the biggest thing is, you want to try and attract talent. Salespeople have a very particular skill set and mindset. And when you're a smaller company, it's not always easy to find that. It is a needle in a haystack. And when you find it, it's great, But when you don't and you're going through the options, yeah, it can take a lot of your time, take a lot of your time when you could be elsewhere. As what my biggest challenge is kind of trying to find those best routes while also keeping the company fresh, keep on going.
Paddy, I'm going to ask you a very leading question here.
Go for it.
Do you think that sales and marketing is something that can be systemized?
To a degree, yeah. I think there is, but there are consequences to it. You see it now, like how many times you open up LinkedIn and you get those marketing messages and you go, high roll. You have to be careful. Do your systems harden or make it harder to capture your audience? Because we all know that hopefully the people that are listening will be all too aware of how many times you've contacted somebody. You might get a phone call. You go, great, Jake, give me your deck. Here are the plans you cost. And then you're ghosted. And you're ghosted until they need you. Until you're needed. But think of how many other people there are trying to contact that person. And then, how hard it is to kind of even get their time. I think you have to be careful about your systems because you begin to lose your tone of voice as well. And there's that personability gone.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Perhaps there's another conversation to be had about systemizing marketing and sales processes, because it is possible to do it without losing that voice. But I think there's probably a longer conversation.
Yeah,
The world's also changing to some degree, and technology speeding some certain things up and losing other areas. There's
absolutely.
no doubt about it.
It has it. Look,
Human
it has its
intelligence.
place. It has its
Yeah,
place, but it's like AI in the world of content. Hopefully that
yeah,
segues into your conversation later on. But like, everything is a tool, and it's a tool to be optimized and used, but it is just a tool. It can't replace
yeah.
the human thought and thinking and heart. Well, I haven't found it to do that anyway. And there are times when you try and replace the humans, and you spend more human time trying to put it together.
And undoing the mistakes. Let's talk really quickly about AI. And
Yeah, yeah.
the reason I say quickly is because we could probably speak for hours about it. It's on everybody's lips all the time. There's so many developments in it, and it is improving at exponential rates.
Mm.
But fundamentally, what's still required is the director, whoever's going to do the prompts. That still requires a kind of creative vision about how you craft that.
Yeah.
So even though AI can generate images, it can generate text and
Yes.
voice, and that is a game changer, because that's changing the economics in terms of content generation and personalization as well. I mean,
Yeah,
personalization in
100%. Yeah.
content is super important. But you still need the creative prompts in order to do it. When I think of one great example was the Trump Gaza thing recently,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when they created the whole piece about it was going to take over Gaza and it's going to become this great
Yeah,
destination.
it was, it was a great
Done
video.
initially,
It was a great song.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
fantastic, right?
yeah,
Done, but actually delivered on the Truth platform by Trump supporters. They
yeah.
they kind of put it out and they used it for themselves. So quite an unusual aspect of communications there. But without going into detail about that thing,
Mm.
as I was watching it, I was sort of shock and horror about what was being portrayed. One of the things that I thought was the creative that came out with that concept, even though it was delivered by a machine,
Mhm.
all the
Yeah,
prompts, the story
yeah.
of it wasn't created by a machine. The story still came from a human being. And to get connection, we're going to see more with AI building connection in the
Mm.
future,
Big time.
most definitely. But actually, you still need that kind of creative, and that production still needs to be defined, so the machine can deliver it in the same way as special effects, VFX in
Yeah.
film have moved forward.
Yeah, yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, they might have killed the model makers that did Sinbad films back in
Yeah.
the day. And they might not be around anymore, but there's another industry that came out of it. And look, the jury's out on that. Are you particularly worried about AI?
I'm only worried about the oversimplification of it right now, of how some more senior members in large organizations think that AI is a silver bullet, and the need of ideation still coming from a human being is no longer required. That's my fear, because you fear then that you're going to kill a brand, you're going to you're going to kill your poor sales or marketing team, who are going to be like, I can't fucking get this to do what it needs to do, what I want it to do, because they don't have that talent, or they don't have that skill set to be able to be confident in their idea creation. So personally, I love AI. I love what it can do. I love I love how it's jumping and moving, but it is a tool. It is a tool. And
Oh,
yeah, I have to go back and say, like, that is my only fear, is the oversimplification of it. It's, remember years ago when I brought out the iPhone, or the camera, and you had more senior members. Sure, I can just get my son or daughter to film that. And you got the poor cameraman going, well, is your son or daughter, trained with that tool? You know,
oh.
because, like, and I think it's a very key thing to kind of say, is like, it doesn't matter the tool in someone else's hand. It's the person who wields that tool is when you get the great content that comes out.
No, I get that. Content is a craft as well as an art.
Yeah,
It's an art and a craft. You ever watch an editor in a film suite, in an edit suite, and seeing what they do?
yeah,
And it takes films and provides context and wonder to it.
absolutely, absolutely.
So complete. I buy into that. And look, there's no running away from it.
No,
It's here.
yeah,
That the the genie is out of the bottle. We're not going to put it back in again. There are obviously some challenges around that, and this is Challenger Stories. We love a challenge.
Yeah,
Uh, some more than others. So look,
of course.
let's just. I'm going to ask you two more questions. Right. The first one: books that have inspired you. What books would you recommend, or a film? It could be a podcast. What kind of key learnings can you share that you can hand over to other viewers?
There is a writer from home, and his name is actually David McWilliams. I think I'm saying the end of that right. But he created a book called The Pope's Children. And for me, it was just such a lovely way to really get to understand the insight into people. His way of talking and identifying trends was just absolutely fabulous. And he was able to look at the children of the 90s, and they what happened in Ireland is that there was a massive spike when the Pope came to Ireland, and they call him John Paul. So the name of children christened John Paul was astronomical in the 80s. And so he's coined that in her generation, the Pope's children. And it was looking to see during the time when Ireland was having, and again, these are his words, not mine, the wonder bra effect of where kind of people from working class backgrounds were suddenly brought up into the middle class. So suddenly Ireland there was no class system really, because most of Ireland was and still is in the working class bracket. And it was just his turn of phrase and being able to look at that. It was a really interesting way as a marketeer, because that's what I did her degree in first off, and then gone on into advertising, was how can you talk about sectors within a market to another client and make it interesting. And he just did it in such a great way, and it was a lovely way to identify how to break that down, what makes people tick, what really motivates them to do things. And that book, for me, I thought it was brilliant. He's actually gone on and made others, but if you were to look at an author and you wanted someone to kind of how to take that heavy, thick research and how to make it entertaining and fun to read, but also fun to be able to deliver or dive into when you're in that space yourself, when you're briefing or being briefed. And another one for me was The Fast Food Nation. I just think anybody that's in the world of marketing or communications should read it, because it's a lovely look back into the history of advertising. Sorry, that's my dog. I don't know how he got in. And it's just a lovely look back at the world of advertising and marketing. It's a real time when brands got to play, because they were a consumer had choice. It was after World War II, wasn't it? Do you know what I mean? And there was that world of advertising. Propaganda had changed from being something in the world of military to into the world of kind of coin. And it was such a lovely way of going back to the basics and really get a grasp of seeing it in practice. And I think as a marketeer, again, anybody in the world of marketing or advertising, it's a really or storytelling to go and learn that basics and see it in practice and what they did, and to kind of use that as a benchmark for their own. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder what they're doing now.
Yeah, of course, the film, The Founder.
I never actually saw the film. This is really bad, It's
about Ray Kroc. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Brilliant story. My son, when he was about 9 years old, sat down and watched it with me, loved it. Thought it was a fantastic film as a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
So great piece of entertainment. You don't even need to think about the business aspect, although it's a brilliant business lesson.
Brilliant.
So look, last question for me is, you meet your 18-year-old self walking on the street. What do you tell them?
Wow. 18-year-old self, be brave. Be brave. Nice. and be confident in your decision making, because you're never irrational. You're going to make some brilliant choices.
And you'll learn from the bad ones. You'll learn from the mistakes that you make.
Yeah.
You're going to make some brilliant choices. I love that. Because do you know what? It's the other thing about a business owner. You often get pointed at that you've made the wrong decisions. Not many people pat you on the back and say you made the right ones.
No, you're very rarely.
They just expect you to, right? That's what you do. You make the right decisions, but that's not an easy thing to do. And running businesses is hard, and it could be lonely. So yeah, have some confidence, believe in yourself. That's wonderful.
And I'd also tell them that you're going to go bald in a year's time and don't worry about it.
Right. Okay. Well, on that bombshell, I'll try not to say that to too many female founders, of course. That'll probably turn them back. So, look, Paddy, thanks so much for your time today. It's been a genuine pleasure. A gentle, kind soul, I can tell that.
Thank you.
And that comes across and really heartfelt. And thank you for opening up. Thank you for being so open in our conversation today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
you really caught me off guard in that one in a lovely way, because it's
Thank
nice to
you.
reflect and yeah, I can't stress enough. Like have some great support, like my co-business owner Louise, to all the rest of the team, the editors, motion graphics, to filmmakers. We are a team, and I wouldn't be here without them. I'm extremely grateful to them.
Yeah. Businesses are built by people
Exactly.
at
Exactly.
the end of the
It
day.
takes somebody sometimes to do some bold stuff, but you do need to, have be surrounded by good people. And the minute you start to think otherwise, I think you start going down a dark road.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No man has an island to capture another cliche.
Yeah, true. But they're there for a reason. They're there for a reason.
Yeah, that's true. They're often they're truisms. Paddy, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really enjoyed speaking with you. It's been
Thank
an
you.
absolute pleasure. Let's keep in contact, of
Oh, likewise.
course.
Yeah, I'll be annoying you more.
I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen with Malt Films. So no doubt we'll be in contact anyway. Paddy, thank you very much. See you again soon.
See you.
So quite a lot of different sound bites in here. There's a nice bit where he gets quite emotional about who his support system were. And there's lots of sort of cliched sound bites. Check out for them in the transcript.